At the beginning of this liturgical year, starting with Advent, I set a goal for myself of playing Bach in every service, partially because I wanted to get to know more of his repertoire and explore it in a little more depth, and partly because I just wanted something to help me focus my practice and just improve my organ playing overall. And I thought that would be a really good exercise for me to do that. Finding music by Bach to play for church is pretty easy because there's so much of it. He was incredibly prolific, especially in terms of writing organ solo music for church. And in particular, there's a collection that he wrote, which is called the Orgelbüchlein, which is German for the Little Organ Book. And in it, he has a chorale prelude for every single Sunday of the year. Starting with Advent, going through Christmas, there's one for New Year's Day, there's a whole series for Lent, for Eastertide, Ascension, Pentecost, etc. Right? So all of that is already out there and available. All of these chorale preludes are maybe 1 or 2 pages. They're very short, maybe a minute to 2 minutes in length on average. The shortest one that I played this year was 36 seconds long. The one that I played for Good Friday is the longest in the book, which is about 6 minutes, but they tend to be about 1.5 minutes in length. So very accessible just in terms of the length, although each of them is pretty difficult in its own way. A chorale prelude is a genre in which a composer takes a hymn tune and gives it an elaborate accompaniment of some sort. Bach was one of the masters of this, but not the only one. He had certainly mentors that he looked back to in time, and people have continued to write in that style. Bach's chorale preludes, especially the ones in the Orgelbüchlein, tend to be in 4 parts: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And the melody is in one of those parts, not always the topmost. Sometimes it's in the feet, in the pedal, but that melody is somewhere there and very distinguishable. The hymn tunes that he used would have been very well known to his German Lutheran congregation in the late 1600s and early 1700s. They were typical hymns that they would have sung every week and knew very well. And most of those would be unfamiliar to us today, but there's a handful that are in our hymnal and that we know. Jesus, priceless treasure, or O sacred head now wounded, or good Christian men rejoice with heart and soul and voice. So some of those tunes are actually ones that we still sing today and know very well. This particular one that I'm playing this morning is a very interesting piece, and I just wanted to introduce a little bit about what it's about. When Pastor Donna and I had a meeting earlier this week, and she told me her theme for the sermon, this was the first thing that popped into my head. I've been looking for a reason to play it, and this was the week. It matches up really well with what I think she'll be speaking about. So you have the translation in your bulletins, but I'll read it out loud for those of you who are at home and may not be able to look at it. So the translation is, God, my noble creator, help me force these syllables into rhyme to the praise of your glory, so that I may joyfully begin to sing of your word, Lord. Stand by me. Bach does a couple of interesting things with this. The tune is in the soprano, and I use a registration that makes it nice and clear so you can hear that melody. And it sounds like this in German. Hilf Gott, dass mir's gelinge, du edle Schöpfer mein, die Silben reimen zwingen, zu Lob den Ehren dein, dass ich mag fröhlich heben an, von deinem Wort zu singen. Herr, du wirst mir beistand. And that's the tune. So Bach puts that tune in the uppermost voice so that it's very prominent. The alto voice, which I play in the same hand with the same sound, is in a canon. A canon is when the same melody follows behind, like around, like row, row, row your boat, right? So it starts in one voice and then it picks up in another voice and just follows it all the way through. Bach often uses this to represent following in Christ's footsteps. And in this particular one, he's asking God to help him force these words into rhyme. So he's calling upon God, and God is leading playing the melody absolutely perfectly, and he's following behind in his footsteps just a couple bars later, choosing to put the canon in another key that doesn't quite work. And in doing so, he winds up with these strange harmonies every now and then at the ends of a phrase that just sound awful. Bach, who couldn't write a bad canon if he tried, clearly tried to write a bad canon. He did this on purpose. And so he does a couple of funny things with it. Every now and then when it hits a sour note, he ends it early. It's like, oh, that sounded awful, I'll just stop it sooner. And in one particular measure, he plays it as short as possible because it's just horrendous, and he just wants to get off of that note as soon as possible. So that's Christ leading the way and him imperfectly following in his footstep, trying to force the words into rhyme, trying to force the notes into harmony. When he gets to the last note, because of the key he's chosen, that note just won't fit. And he hangs on to it uncomfortably as long as he possibly can, and then just adds a couple of extra notes to get it to where it needs to go. So I think that's kind of a bit of Bach's humor and cleverness in writing it. The tenor voice, which I play in my left hand, meanders constantly throughout the whole thing. It plays really low, really high, and it makes no sense whatsoever. It doesn't fit with anything. It's like a babbling voice that's constantly talking but saying nothing. And it's sometimes in the wrong key. It changes key in the middle of a beat. It just is all over the place. And it's often right in the middle of the tunes, just kind of getting in the way all of the time. The bass voice is in my feet, and he constantly avoids playing it on the downbeat. There's these strange syncopations and leaps all over the place that also make no sense. So it's an example of Bach, who is one of the greatest composers, trying to write a bad piece of music. And I think it's a very unusual piece in terms of his overall output, and I think it's kind of a fun setting of, God, please help me force these words into rhyme. Help me force these notes into a harmony. So here is Hilf Gott, dass mir's gelinge.